Hello, this is Harold Szymanski of Stratus Admissions Counseling. I'm here today with my colleague Jennifer Jackson to talk to you a little bit about Harvard Business School and MIT Sloan, how they're the same and how they're different, and how you want to think about each of them. So as I said, my name is Harold Szymanski. I'm one of the senior counseling members here at Stratus. And just to give you a little bit of sense of my background. So I went to MBA, went to MIT Sloan, I graduated in 1999. I then went off and did a couple years at Bain & Company, an experience that valuable on some level, but highly unenjoyable for me, as I had always been an entrepreneur by heart. So after Bain, I went off and founded a number of different companies. They included companies in the green space, they included companies in financial services, a few other things thrown in there. And finally, over the last couple of years, I've come to work with Stratus, for the simple reason that I really enjoy working with this population. I feel like I develop a great relationship with clients who in turn are better able to produce their applications sort of based on our work together. On that note, let me pass it over to Jennifer, and she can give a little bit of background about herself.
Thank you, Harold. So my name's Jennifer Jackson. I was a MBA at HBS class of 99. Before that, I was at Edelman Public Relations in Washington, and I had been a journalism major at Northwestern. So I had sort of an untraditional path to HBS. And after HBS, I joined Hewitt Associates, which is an HR consulting firm, and I was in the talent management space, really looking at attracting, motivating, and retaining clients. Employees, and how we can help clients sort of connect their HR strategy to their business strategy. And after that, I stayed home with my children for a while, and now at Stratus, I'm having the opportunity for the first time in my career to have a personal relationship with my clients. So for the first time, it's not a business-to-business relationship, and I find that extraordinarily rewarding. And I'm very happy to be here to talk about my experience at HBS.
Terrific then. Well, Jennifer, I don't know what your experience was, but the first time I went to look at HBS, I was just completely overwhelmed by the campus and all that was going on there. And if you have in your mind what your classic Ivy League campus looks like, I don't think there's any better example of it than HBS.
Absolutely. So, for example, if you would never see a piece of garbage, anywhere on the campus. Everything, it's like sort of like Disney World. Everything is completely and utterly perfect. And they spend an enormous amount of time and money getting it like that. And it sort of sets the stage for a little bit more formality overall on the campus, which is also true for Harvard undergrad. Really amazing facilities there. Everything looks beautiful. It's a lot nicer even than when I was there. They have a lot. The last time I visited, I couldn't believe, how nice the student center was and all the different food options and all that kind of stuff. One interesting piece that I think is different from MIT is we are not integrated at HBS within the very local community there in Alston. It is much more sort of like an island. You're in Alston, but you're not in Cambridge, you're not really in Boston, you don't really interact with any residents of Alston, and people live on campus. So it's a very different setup, I think. And as far as climate, as you might imagine, it's not necessarily why people go there to either of these schools. It's cold and it's a long winter. But that's sort of the general aesthetics and location facilities aspect of Harvard.
No, believe me, that was exactly my experience. I used to take a class at Harvard when I was at MIT Sloan, and it was like literally going through some sort of, time warp, if that's even the right way of describing it. I'd leave Sloan with its rather gritty facilities, and unfortunately, HBS is not that easy to get to. So some combination of T and bus, or now it probably would have taken an Uber rather, and suddenly you're in a different place in a different world, which is in some ways is very exciting. A campus that is really self-contained. You have so many facilities in one place. But as I said, MIT Sloan is quite different. First of all, your experience might be getting there and wondering, am I in some sort of bus station or some sort of Middle Eastern Casbah as soon as you get there. The reality is like Jennifer said, it's as if we were in the middle of a city, which, the east side of Cambridge really is. So it is completely surrounded by the university itself. So Sloan is very much integrated into the rest of the MIT campus, and they take great pride in that, as well as more broadly, just who its neighbors are. And what has certainly changed since I was there, now MIT Sloan is across the street from Google, from Amazon, from Microsoft, and from Facebook, literally, across the street. I myself work in a startup incubation center, again, across the street. And there's just really a lot going on that is in some ways not even related to MIT Sloan, but very much relevant to it. And also, since I've been there, they built a huge new building. So certainly the facilities are catching up, but by no means will they ever be sort of what HBS is. Different housing options are available. If you're a married student, you have the luxury of really a huge high-rise right next to the school. So that makes things really easy. The flip side is if you are unmarried or on your own, then you really have to find something off campus, which, for better or worse, you can imagine what a student apartment looks like. And that's potentially where you're spending a couple years. At the same point, you end up being probably close to all sorts of different restaurants and other activities going on. And I agree with Jennifer, though, nobody goes there for the weather, though I always get the sense that the weather's ever so slightly better at HBS than it is at MIT Sloan.
That might be.
Which brings us to the culture. And Jennifer, my sense of HBS is quite a formal culture. What is your sense of things?
So part of that is true, but when you're there, it's not like if you are someone who's a little bit more informal, that you're not going to be able to exist there happily. I will agree with you. You will find more people who are going to be running around in khakis than jeans, but there's certainly no dress code or anything like that. And I felt like all kinds of people were welcome there, but it is true, probably the professors set the tone for part of that. And then just a lot of students might come from a little more of a buttoned up atmosphere. But if you're not one of those people, it's not as though you would feel uncomfortable or unwelcome there. So, and it's certainly, both of these schools are extremely global. I think most of all these top 10 schools, and HBS probably has about 35% international students. And I just felt like I could have been anywhere in the world. And Dubai Airport is a great way to think about it, because there are just so many different languages spoken, and you're just feeling such diversity, really from morning till night, because you're meeting with your study group in the morning, at least we did. And, people from all over the world are there. And I happen to have a very supportive and wonderful study group. So the notion that HBS is a cutthroat place is not the case. I had a guy from Habitat for Humanity in my study group. And even when somebody was in my section, and in theory, you're competing against people in your section because HBS grades on a curve there. So everybody is graded against everybody else. People would help and support one another in getting ready for the case discussion. So, which brings me to the section atmosphere is a huge part of HBS. So in the first year, you're not going around to classes to see professors. The professors come to you. So each section, maybe A through K, when I was there, I believe there are 90 people now, there were 80 people per section when I was there, has a classroom, and every professor just cycles in and out of your classroom, and you just stay there, and you have an assigned seat. You can never leave your seat. In fact, not even really to go to the bathroom, no matter how long the class was. So it is a really intense bonding experience with that group, and you become more and more comfortable with the people in that classroom, which is very important because class participation is a large part of your grade. And if you're intimidated by the people in your classroom or by the subject matter, it's much harder to want to speak in front of everybody. So I found that once you get to know all these people and you're seeing them socially, also, we have a work hard, play hard atmosphere there. And so you're seeing them outside of the classroom and inside, and you just become a big family. And there's not so much socializing among other sections unless you join clubs and all that, which we'll get to later. But the section is a very critical part of the HBS experience.
No, that was certainly my feeling as well. And I took a course over at HBS, and you could tell immediately just how close the section was to each other and how well they knew each other. With Sloan, it's a little bit different in the sense of while you are in a section, or you take all your classes with a certain group of people, probably around 60 people for your first semester. Going beyond that, it really is a time when you can choose electives, so you're always going to be bumping into different people. And only for about 400 per class, that means by the end of your 2 years, you really should get to know everybody and have a good sense of everyone. You know, I joke with people, you may not like everybody, but you will certainly know them. You know, the one thing that I did like about MIT is this idea. It was very dynamic in the sense of people were sort of always, you know, coming in and going out of your life and your world. So you may have that first 6 or 7 people that very first semester who you are very close to just because it's such a hard, intense semester. But then beyond that, you know, you may never have another course with those folks, but you'd still see them at the different functions happening. MIT is certainly a very informal place. You know, we put here more of a jeans place. It's almost, you know, more of a flip-flop slip place. And, you know, I think professors play something of a different role when it comes to culture. And at HBS, you know, Jennifer, you know, made it clear that professors in some ways really set the culture and set the tone. And, you know, at MIT, I think it's really the other way, where professors are a little bit more distant, so it's really up to the students, you know, to set the culture, you know, sometimes better and sometimes worse. And, you know, the reality for most folks is they're here to do, you know, many different exciting things. And most folks don't really care who they do it with. So what you'll see floating around campus is a number of undergraduates, a number of folks coming from, you know, different parts of the university, even from some of the local schools as well. So it has sort of this more, you know, I think I call it sort of this Middle East Casbah feel to it. You know, with this idea, again, a lot of different languages being spoken, you know, a lot of different, you know, types of folks there. But the reality is that everyone there is, we used to say, smart doing smart things. You know, and when I say here also that students move around between and through professors, you know, I think what that really means is students are somewhat skeptical almost in terms of the overall value a professor can add. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but I mean it in the sense of, you know, your professor really isn't God there. There's simply one other person in the classroom that, and it's not unusual for, you know, MIT students to, you know, really have some, you know, interesting exchanges with their professors, you know, very much on sort of a peer-to-peer level. And when I talk about, you know, students moving through their professors, I know it is essentially unheard of for folks at HBS to either skip a class or to simply be doing other things when they should be meeting with professors or even in class with professors. You know, at MIT, if the professor is adding value, great. And if they're not, then the reality is that, you know, students aren't going to pay them much heed. And that's for, you know, for better or worse. And honestly, you know, again, this informal culture sort of comes to play in it, but also being sort of this exciting place where people are measured by ideas more than anything else. You know, on that note, where you will see a difference is with regards to the curriculum. Jennifer, you want to talk a little bit about the HBS curriculum?
Yes. So definitely it's not flexible in the first year. So the flexibility comes in the second year. In the first year, you have a required core curriculum. And as one professor told me when I was there, sort of lamenting how difficult it is to learn accounting and finance through the case method, he said, well, we're moving at a glacial pace. And in the time since I've been there, they have moved to augment the case method with a little bit more experiential learning, including what they call field. And it's an immersion experience, a year long, and it is in the first year. So it is a great complement to case method teaching. And so now students have the opportunity to act like leaders and translate ideas into practice in sort of a real world setting. In small teams, interactive workshops, they can sort of test their leadership style. And then at the end of the spring term, students get sent out into global markets around the world to develop a new product or service concept for different global partner organizations that HBS has. So that's something I would have loved to have when I was there. The whole first year was, finance, accounting, technology and operations, marketing. Not that it wasn't useful, because it was, but there was no veering whatsoever from the case method. And when you came, like I did, from the communication space, it took some. That's where my study group came in very handy, and it took a lot of support. And there were definitely helpful professors, lots of helpful students that can work with you outside of class, and everybody makes it through, and it all turns out okay. But if you're looking for a lot of flexibility in the first year, HBS is not your place. You can get that in the second year. So there really are more than 120 electives at HBS. I think there are more than 30 in the entrepreneurship space, and that's, I'm sure, more than when I was there before. So they are moving, but they're moving somewhat glacially.
That makes sense. With regard to MIT, where you feel the most pain is definitely your first semester. It is the core when you take, your classes, classic marketing, strategy, finance, operation courses. A lot is even spent on some sort of statistical analysis, maybe not as much as people think, but that is known for being particularly hard. And really the first semester at Sloan is overwhelming. They do work very, very quickly. And it really is an element of having to be supported by your team, and in some ways even more than that, to the point of really sort of engaging one-on-one and making sure that your teammate can sort of get over the hurdle in its various classes. There's frequently blood in the streets that first semester in terms of finishing things, like the economics study packet, which I'm still having nightmares about to this day. But once that first semester is over, then things get sort of a much more loose, as well as just exposed not just to electives, but also opportunities to go abroad, and that's through the action learning labs. And that has become a real core part of MIT Sloan. They see it as a real, point of distinction with other schools, and they've put a lot of time and energy and effort into creating these experiences where you do some classwork learning, focus on a particular business topic. You then spend time in the field working on it. You then come back to the class to maybe pull together some conclusions. And these action learning labs are literally all over the place. And you could find yourself in a Brazilian consumer-focused product company, or you can find yourself in an Israeli startup, or there's opportunities in Africa, certainly across the world. And the reality, again, with MIT is wonderful place, very dynamic. That said, there are some awfully strong teachers. MIT is probably about a third to a half using the case method, and your case teachers are always very good. And I'm not quite sure as good as HBS. I think at the end of the day, HBS probably does the best job as far as teaching cases, and one could even say the best job generally as far as teaching students. But with MIT, in certain classes, you're going to have wonderful professors, particularly with regard to case classes, and other professors are just deadly boring. And though they may end up winning the Nobel Prize, which many of them do, their classes are really interminable, to the point that some students just, stop going. With the expectation they'll just learn it on their own. And again, this is sort of a reflection of MIT, where smart counts and people will only be engaged, as long as it's worth it. The one thing that I learned at MIT, maybe better than anything else, is this concept of efficiency of effort. Are you putting in just enough effort to have the result that you want? So in the extreme, it's if you're working too hard to get an A, if you're working to get an A+, you're working too hard. You always want to get a 91, and you want to put in the effort to get a 91 rather than an 89. So, again, at MIT, what is most important is probably what you find most important, because that's what you can focus in. With that in mind, clubs and extracurriculars, HBS, certainly has more clubs than anyone else out there. But let me turn it over to Jennifer to talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, one area where HBS really shines is just the resources inside and outside the classroom. So any possible thing that you have an interest in, there will be, just because the class is so huge, it's 900 and some, there will be other people who are also interested in it. And I imagine if you have an idea for a club that is not there, you can find people to start it with you. So whether you have the time first year when you're getting hammered by that core curriculum in the beginning and, you know, trying to stay afloat, which some of the journalism majors were, yeah, that's a sort of a different issue, but you're absolutely going to have any possibility for a club at your fingertips. The Wine and Cuisine Society, Women's Student Association, Healthcare Club, Consulting Club, Marketing, Tech Club, Entrepreneurship, everything. And there's also just going to be resources from around the world that converge to put on, you know, these enormous, very successful annual conferences that people come for and plan for, and you can make all kinds of industry connections. And it's a great way for students to test their soft skills when they're planning these events and they're taking part in them. And it's a recruiting issue as well. They're going to meet people that are going to be useful probably in their job search later. So any interest you have is going to be met if you understand what your options are and go get it. If you're an entrepreneur, there's a lot going on there at HBS that has been steadily gaining steam. So this annual new venture competition with cash prizes is a big piece of what they're offering now. So any kind of, you know, idea that you have, you're going to be competing against people from all over the world who have various ideas that are also going to be extremely successful in the future, hopefully. There's something called Rock Accelerator. So if you have a startup that's in the very early stage of existence and it's got a lot of hope for the future, you can get a lot of help with this immersive program to basically accelerate your idea, get a lot of smart people working together to move it forward. Entrepreneurs in residence. So HBS has people on tap to meet with you about your idea, people who have been through it. They're going to be alums. They're going to be people with connections to the university that want to help you succeed. And then I think, Harold, you're going to say something about the entrepreneurship at MIT, but I know the iLab, the innovation lab at HBS, is very different from what's going on over at MIT, but they are moving toward more entrepreneurship at HBS than in the past. So entrepreneurs can feel comfortable going there. It's much more of a formal atmosphere than you'll find it at MIT, but at any stage of an idea, you can get help. There are going to be resources at this innovation lab to help you.
You know, Jennifer, picking up on that point about the iLab over at HBS versus sort of what's happening over at MIT Sloan, you know, I'll come back to a story that I think really encapsulated, and this is an experience that our colleague Susan Sarah had. You know, when you go, and when I go to the iLab as well, which I do occasionally, in order to get inside and actually to meet with some of the companies, you actually need to check in at the front desk, you know, give them an ID. You know, honestly, it's like going into maybe the Pentagon or something, sort of hard to get in there. And then when you get in there, you know, there's certainly, you know, a vibrant environment there, you know, mainly, you know, filled with folks who are HBS students. You know, and it's quite different at MIT, which I think reflects its culture, sort of a, you know, certainly a much more informal culture. So the various places, and there's a number of them on campus, which are incubators to start companies, you know, are really these places incredibly informal. People come and go as they want. Sometimes they just come for food. Sometimes they are there just to hang out or play ping pong. And sort of, you know, one of the funny stories that really encapsulates this is that for a while there, you know, the staff at the MIT Entrepreneurship Center was always wondering if a person who was just hanging out there was just an MIT undergrad or a homeless person, because frequently the homeless people there actually looked very much like the MIT undergrads, and probably even some of the you know, MIT grad students as well. So again, this is really indicative of a place of just, you know, free-flowing ideas and a lot of exciting things happening. And honestly, it's very rare for a MIT Sloan startup just to include MIT MBA students. There's just too much happening on campus, too many interesting things happening on campus. A lot having to do with just some of the technical, backgrounds, things are going on. What's sort of a very hotbed for a place to start a company is coming out of the MIT Technology and Licensing Office, and you can imagine with a university filled with scientists, they're always coming up with some good ideas, not quite sure what to do with them. MIT owns the rights of them, so if people hang out long enough at the licensing office, they'll get a good idea and turn it into a company. That is not unusual. In my own experience, in my particular year, I was doing an entrepreneurship lab with a kid, literally, who was 20 years old, and he was a Harvard undergrad, but he came over to MIT. And while my colleagues and I never hit it big as entrepreneurs, he did. So before he graduated, Harvard, through his MIT connections, he ended up getting a company funded for about $7 million, working in, artificial languages or something. You can tell where my own technological expertise is. Similarly, a colleague of mine was the MBA who helped found Akamai, and he connected with two MIT professors, in the computer science department to found a company that, is now $1 billion company. I think his one regret, no doubt, is he actually dropped out of school to do that company instead of, spend the rest of his last year there with folks like us. But I'm sure from a net present value perspective, I think he was probably far ahead at that point. More generally, MIT actually has a real focus now on sustainability. So there's a lot happening as far as that goes, both in terms of courses and clubs and lunches and conferences and trips. So there's always something happening there. And then there's also sort of these other quirky things happening at MIT that I'm not sure they're the only place that does it, but it is certainly something that they've developed a specialty in, and that's sort of hacking those things that one need not think could be hacked. So in that regard, there's the Sloan Sports Analytics Hackathon that happens every year. It's somewhat famous. It basically is where, these sports inclined geeks sort of go Moneyball crazy with regard to different athletics. So the current general manager of the Houston Rockets, for example, is sort of the host of this. He's an MIT MBA, Sloan MBA. Also, they started something called the Hacking the Arts Conference, which is all about different types of ways of creating art, particularly with some technological bent to it. The MIT Media Lab is always floating around there doing sort of generally crazy sorts of things. But, it is a exciting place to be. But again, you really have to go out and find it. I think it's, many ways less structured. So if you're not the type of person who can actually go out there and find their place, then it makes it sort of for a less rich experience, I would say. And that's, certainly the case. And I'll just sort of go forward here a little bit with MIT and then circle back to HBS. It's really that informal entrepreneurial idea that's so core to MIT Sloan that really you see manifested in its career services, which honestly are thin, or they certainly used to be thin. I think they're a lot better now, but you really needed to be very entrepreneurial in your job hunt. I mean, we had the same recruiters on campus as HBS does, to the point that, when we all got called for our first McKinsey interviews, which I think McKinsey's the largest hire for us, we were all bussed over to a hotel, and when we got there, there was 200 of us, and there were 400 HBS MBAs all getting these, clearly very intense 5-minute interviews. But again, we have, the big recruiters there, but, the more interesting things you really have to go out and get yourself. With that in mind, Jennifer, you want to just touch on sort of career services at HBS?
Sure. So this is an area really where HBS shines, and it's gotten much more robust over the past 10 and 15 years too. So now you can have a private career coach, and these are particularly for people who might be going outside of the consulting, or the finance spaces, and they might need a little bit more help. And that person is going to work with you starting in the first year and starting, with your internship in the summer and working with you throughout your time there. The resources are just enormous. a lot of people know about the huge HBS alumni network, and it's not as integrated with the Harvard University alumni network like MIT is, just like it's not so integrated with Harvard when you're a student at HBS because it's over on its own island in Alston. But you've got 46,000 alums in every, basically every country, and anything you need help or support with, they're ready and willing to help you. And I've just been so impressed since I've been out at how strong the alumni system is and how they just really want to help their people, both from the campus, and then all the alums themselves are just really wanting to help. And there's so much interest in the reunions every 5 years. I have so much fun going back there and seeing everyone and just being on the campus and seeing everything that's changed. It's really exciting. And what I will say as far as career development is, since I went into a little bit of an untraditional type of consulting role, I don't know of any other students that went into human resources consulting at that time, although there might have been. I did not have help, with recruiting because those companies weren't coming to campus. But I will say that when you're going to HBS, you're going to get those jobs. So it was not hard to go off on my own. And so both of these schools, and the top 10 schools, you're going to be able to get the job you kind of want. It's just how much effort you might have to go to on your own, but they are going to be opening doors for you. So take it away, Harold.
Yeah, of course. And like I said before, MIT Career Services, it is likely that you can certainly go out there and get any job you want. Certain industries, are a little bit harder to get into. Generally MIT Sloan is not really seen as a big investment banking feeder, if you will. But that said, I certainly had a lot of my classmates who went into, investment banking and are still there now. And right now, though, Amazon, McKinsey, BCG, Google are certainly the #1 employers of students coming out of MIT. And finally, you'll start seeing, Goldman Sachs or some of the other investment banks probably, taking, 10 or 12 a year, as opposed to HBS maybe, sending, I don't know, 40, 50, 100 people to investment banking. But, we all get our share of superstar graduates. And in many ways, no better example of that is HBS.
Yes. So you can see from this list here, just a lot of household names went to HBS. George W. Bush isn't on here, but he's an HBS grad too. So HBS is trying to build leaders, which MIT also is. And there's certainly lots of entrepreneurs, but then there are also lots of multinational, CEOs. So 22 of the Fortune 500 companies CEOs are coming from HBS, and then this list that we have here. So I don't think that list is really much of a surprise. But then there are just lots of people you're never going to hear about that are working in, like my classmate who was in Habitat for Humanity. He went back to doing nonprofit work in his community, and they're just people doing all kinds of interesting things outside of, being a CEO as well. But it's just such an enormous class that we're also going to have probably more than our fair share of CEOs.
Great. At MIT, one of the purposes of this list is also show that we do produce our own, number of CEOs each year, and probably less than other schools because our folks are just a little bit, focused in a different way. Generally, I think it's somewhat self-selective as far as who ends up going to MIT. And really, you can see here the list. I think, MIT has an interesting relationship with Ford Motor. It's one of our sponsors of our Leaders for Global Organizations LGO program, which is getting a master's in engineering as well as an MBA. And maybe it all comes down to Bill Ford, the grandson or great-grandson of Henry Ford, who used to be the CEO of the company, has had a presence on campus. But then the most recent CEO, Alan Mulally, was also a Ford CEO, before that a Boeing CEO, MIT Sloan grad. You know, at the end of the day, when it comes to producing CEOs, you know, Harvard's certainly far and away the place that does it better than anyone else. You know, MIT Sloan does some CEOs, but also does some other interesting types of people like Kofi Annan, the former head of the UN, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel. And I also joke with people that, you know, certainly MIT Sloan produces, you know, it's rather, you know, large share of failures. And by that, I mean, when you're playing in the startup spaces, most of the graduates are, many of the graduates are, they're going to start some companies and fail at a lot of them. So you certainly have that experience as well. You know, at this point, let's just go over a little bit of how we can help you. And if there's one thing Jennifer and I certainly want to communicate is we make deep relationships with all of our clients. And the reason for that is because we need to know our clients very well to help them produce the best application they possibly can. You know, at Stratus, you know, authenticity is such a key part of what we want our applicants to communicate. And that only happens over time. And that only happens with sort of robust communication between us, so we can help you really paint the best picture possible for you as an applicant. So MIT and MBA are actually within your grasp. You know, and as you can see from some of the statistics on this last page, you know, most people right now who are very serious about the top schools end up working with an admissions consultant like Stratus. And we're very proud of not just, you know, the candidates who we've gotten into the top schools, and we have certainly gotten candidates into every one of the top 20 schools, and I think we're very good at it. But another thing that we help you do is make sure that you're really going and getting to the right school that's right for you. And part of that is a reflection of the fact that you know, we know these schools very well. You know, not just Jennifer knows HBS, we have a number of other, you know, counselors who know HBS very, very well. I'm not the only one who knows MIT. We have a lot of counselors who know MIT very well. And we make sure that you connect with these people, particularly as you write your essay. Part of our team approach is you working with a counselor, you working with a senior counselor who then, you know, another person to come in and look at your work. You end up writing your essays with both of our helps, but then you have your essay read by someone who has a deep understanding and a deep relationship with that specific school. And we think that that really makes a difference. And we see this team approach as really being a competitive advantage for what we do. So with that in mind, let me just throw in a last commercial here. You know, if you'd like to have a free consultation with either Jennifer, myself, or one of our other counselors, you know, please, you'll see a link right there. You know, let us understand better how we can help you. You know, basically these conversations run for about 30 minutes. We get a better sense of who you are, as well as you get a better sense of who we are, with this idea here of how can we all work together to get you into the program that is right for you. On that note, we're going to be signing off here, but again, please contact us, and we'd love to talk to you more about, you know, different opportunities you might have in going to business school. Thank you very much.
Thank you.